I have brought in a special friend who has got a wealth of knowledge in an area that is important to all women, especially pregnant and postpartum women. Phoebe Marinovich.
Hello.
She is a pelvic health physio.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming. Look, even if issues don't directly affect you, I think everyone knows someone who has experienced a pelvic issue at some point during or after their pregnancy. I mean, Phoebe's been on the hotline to me many a time. First of all, why is pelvic health discussed so much during and post pregnancy?
Yeah. So I guess during pregnancy and in the postnatal period, your pelvic floor muscles are under like the highest demand that they probably will be in their life, really, as a woman. So the pelvic floor muscles are a group of muscles. Do you guys know much about the pelvic floor? No.
Just from you.
So they're a group of muscles that attach at the front of the pelvis here on the pubic bone, so that bony bit, and they come all the way around and under to the coccyx bone. So I think a lot of people think it's just one muscle. I think that's probably something that women are like, oh, I didn't know there was so many there. So it's all of this red stuff here is the pelvic floor as well. So they've got really important functions for us as women to keep us continent, so all the time, just pregnant, not pregnant, they're always working to keep us continent through our bladder and our bowel as well. They also work to support our pelvic organs. So the pelvic organs are like the bladder, the uterus and the bowel. Keeping it all up and in. Yeah. Exactly. They've got a big sexual function and they work with your lower back and keep that postural support going as well.
Connected.
So it's all connected. So then in pregnancy, with the hormones and growing baby, extra weight gain, those muscles are having to work like a million times harder to maintain all those functions, like continence and everything I just kind of mentioned. Yeah, and then add like a, vaginal delivery or even a cesarean, those muscles are being stretched or, torn, or episiotomies, and so they get a little bit weaker, so they're having to work really, really hard. So there's a huge emphasis on maintaining a strong pelvic floor.
What is a prolapse and how do you know if you've got one?
Yeah. So a prolapse is, so we talked about the organs, the pelvic organs, so there's the bladder, the uterus and the bowel. A prolapse is when one or more of those three things descend down in the pelvis and kind of descend down into the vaginal wall, so the front wall, the back wall or the top wall.
Not what we need.
Not what we need, no. It is very common, not normal, but it is very common. So the most common symptom, I guess, is that women will present and say, I just feel like I've got like a lump or a bulge in my vagina. So quite often, I was in the shower washing and then like, oh my goodness, I felt something there. That's probably the biggest symptom.
Is it like a heaviness almost?
So yeah, and on that, then people will say, I feel like a vaginal heaviness or a dragging sensation. And that can kind of be many other things, so that definitely is a symptom of prolapse, but if you do have that, it doesn't mean you have prolapse. I think the most common symptom is presence of a lump or bulge.
That's what happened to me. I was in the shower.
I
can't remember how old Hendrix was, and he was a heavy baby, 4.2 kilos, and had a lot of fluid, and you come out of it after a baby and you feel like you've lost your body, your boobs have like dropped, and I was in the shower washing myself, and then I was like, oh my god, what is this? And I felt this lump, and I called for Luke and I screamed and I said, bring me a mirror. So I had a look, and I just broke down in tears because I was like,
could you see something?
You could see it. It had literally like,
did this look like a
lump? Kind of, and to be honest, I would have had no idea about this until a friend spoke to me before this happened to me and told me it happened to her. Otherwise, I would have had no idea.
Right. And really alarming. And
it's scary. And I was like, does the baby want to take anything else from my body? Like, I thought my vagina was the only thing I had left.
Not my vagina.
No. Yeah, really scary.
And then I went to a women's physio and they examined me. And it was actually the rectum wall that had come in, but it was, she kind of just like put it back and said it was like, I don't know the technical terms, but she said I had a really strong pelvic floor muscle, and that I didn't need to be careful of like certain exercises and strengthening again, but it wasn't actually that bad, and everything kind of went back to normal unless you like push or anything like that. It can pop back out.
And were you really early postnatal?
Yes.
Yeah. So you just pushed a baby out.
Yeah. So
things are
everything
gonna
was
move
kind
a
of
little
like
bit.
it's back to normal now.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, great. Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
So you say you
days.
call it a prolapse when it's not just always your pelvic floor, like your uterus. It's
the bladder,
Yep.
the uterus, or the bowel. So that can affect the front wall, the back wall, or the top,
Right.
or it can be one or two or three of those.
And then
things.
why does it come out and sometimes looks like a bit of a donut? Is that right?
Yeah, well,
What
so
is that?
it's basically the vagina's like a canal, and the bladder and the uterus and the bowel. So in your case, the bowel that had dropped down, so it pushes on the vaginal wall. So it's just tissue pushing down.
true.
So it looks like a donut.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
I had a friend call me probably 3 months ago because I told her about my prolapse and she was crying and I started crying because I remember that feeling of like, oh, you poor thing.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't have known unless I told her.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't
Yeah.
have known unless my friend told
So
me.
this is healthy discussion,
No.
right? Like,
Are there any other symptoms other than the physical?
yeah, so you can have like, difficulty emptying your bowels, difficulty emptying your bladder. Anything.
Can it be painful?
It can be painful. It's not typically like the number one symptom at all, I wouldn't
No.
say. Not typically. It's more that like pelvic heaviness or dragging sensation or
Yeah.
presence of bulge.
And if you don't do anything about it, what are the implications?
Yeah, so we like to prevent it happening, obviously.
okay.
So you can kind of, if you were to see a women's health physio in your pregnancy, what we would do is like identify your personal risk factors for developing prolapse, and then when you have, say, a vaginal delivery, because the biggest risk factor for developing prolapse is vaginal delivery, big baby, so over 4 kilos as well, that is further increasing your risk the more babies you have, all those things. But then also things like genetics, like if your mother or sister, your tissue type, that kind of thing. So some women are more prone to getting it. And then there's other things like obesity and chronic coughing and pressure, type of exercise, any weightlifters, they are just a little bit more at risk. We want to prevent it. Pelvic floor muscle training is the first line of treatment for it, but done correctly. That's really, really important. And then, like you were saying, like return to exercise after the baby, it needs to be done in a graded way. Like, so you obviously saw a good women's health physio that said, okay, let's not load it too much, but get you moving, because that's really important for other reasons, and mental health when you've had like a baby, just to be able to, do something. But I think the big thing in the way I practice as well is just trying to empower the women to feel like they can, they can move. You don't have to just like freeze because you've got a little bit of a prolapse or something. It's like empowering them to keep moving, but in a safe way. And getting back to running. And there are things, if quite a lot of women will say to me, like, they've got a little bit of an unstable prolapse potentially after the baby, but I need to go running for my mental health. If I can't go running, my life, and that is more important. Mental health as a new mum, and that's way more important. So there are options, like, I don't know if you wore a pessary or which are like basically these silicone rings, usually support rings that you put up in the vagina, and they splint the walls open, and it's kind of like a sports bra for the vagina. So she would just put it in, go for her run, get everything clear in her mind, take it out, and that's sort of splinting it open.
That's so amazing
Good.
that that's available.
That's so
So there's always options, but pelvic floor muscle training definitely is the first line.
And do you suggest going to see a women's health physio at what point, like to strengthen it prior to pregnancy, or coming during pregnancy, or postpartum?
That's a good question. It's rare, but I sometimes do see women before they even have fallen pregnant, like the super organised ones that are like, I just want to get checked. And I'm like, you know what? Like, this is amazing that you're here, because if I could catch every woman at this point, how great to give you all the knowledge about your body and all the things that you can do to prevent, issues with the pelvic floor happening. That would be amazing. But obviously people really only come when there's something that's bothering them. But during pregnancy, definitely. And then in that postnatal period, we usually say 6 weeks is like for that first checkup. And, you're in a bit of a cloud and bubble or whatever you want to call it.
I think there should be like procedure. You go to your GP after 6 weeks.
It should be part of that
Why
checkup.
does no one tell you to go see a women's health physio at 6 weeks? weeks.
I think
Yes.
it's
I think it's getting
improving
more and
the more you
talked
talk
about.
about
Yeah.
it,
It is.
but it should be part of
It should
the
be part of
standard
the process.
procedure.
Yeah.
I
That's-
didn't even know
that's what
where
we
to go
believe.
after that happened. Like I was like, do I go to my GP?
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
friend suggested,
Yeah.
no, go to a women's
Yeah,
health physio.
people present to emergency sometimes
Oh,
with,
really?
with like, you know, older ladies where they might do something and, you know, like it might just be, you can sometimes acutely get it like lifting something that's
Yeah.
a little bit unstable, but then that kind of tips it over.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, it's like,
What's
like you were like,
happened?
what is
What-
that?
yeah.
Like, what has happened
Yeah.
here? So, I agree. I think every woman should just, no matter how fit, healthy, well you feel, I think it's empowering to know about your body.
Yeah.
And to be honest,
I
like,
need to go.
would you ever have, you know, an ACL reconstruction and then not go to physio?
Yeah.
But yet we push babies out of our vaginas and just go, oh well, like
Yeah.
let's just power on. Like,
Seriously.
Back to
like,
normal.
go to
One
the
appointment
physio.
6 weeks later.
Yeah,
That's
it's
wow.
like it's
Yeah.
must. They need
I need to
Yes.
come to you because I've had 3 babies and
Yeah.
I've never been to a women's physio, so
Get a checkup.
I'll be booking in.
Good on you.
So, does the appearance of the vagina change after birth?
Good question. I think that at the 6-week check, women, I can see the difference when they sit down in the chair at the beginning of our hour-long appointment.
Yeah.
A bit of stress, a bit of tension, whatever, they might have had trauma with their birth or, you know, whatever's going on. They're really worried about the appearance of their vagina.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Like on
something
the
might have happened.
outside?
I don't know, I guess so, just
Yeah.
in general, or like they're waiting for this appointment to then go and be like, I can have sex if they feel like it at 6 weeks,
Yeah.
you know, or whenever later. But they're waiting for someone else. Like, I think you saying you looked in the mirror, like, I think a lot of women in my just experience with seeing women are a bit too scared, like,
Yeah.
to even know, like, so they're just like,
Oh my
just
gosh.
I don't-
Phoebe, you
I
do
would
it.
have been too scared
Too
to
scared
look,
to
for
see.
sure.
So like in answer to your question, I think you can feel a lot of things if you've had tearing and scars. You'll have scar tissue, so that will feel different on your
Yeah.
vagina. Your bladder and your bowel might feel different because your pelvic floor muscles are weaker, so that everything feels weaker. You might have some heaviness. So I think you feel like, oh
It's
my
gonna
god,
look-
this is going to look like a war zone.
Yeah.
And then they get on the bed and we do it all, and you know, it's like the vagina doesn't look like what you're imagining it
Yeah.
to look like.
Yeah.
It's like, there might be some weakness, there might be
Yeah.
some scar tissue, of course, but it's never like, I think then they sit back down and it's like this, like they're like,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I've had
Yeah.
that checked, and like,
Yeah.
you know,
Tick of approval.
Sigh
tick of
of
approval, yep, husband sends them back, they're like,
Yeah.
go back to that one, so everything's fine.
I know, it's because my first birth was quite not traumatic, but delivered in emergency situation because they thought I'd need an emergency cesarean, and she was vacuumed out, and so there was a bit of like trauma there. I had an episiotomy, and you definitely feel like it's a war zone.
Yeah,
Like I was
of course.
hobbling around, and so I
Yeah.
think because you feel something,
Yeah.
You're like,
you imagine
Yeah.
it would
And
look like it's been
exactly.
through.
You've just
that.
pushed, or you know, if you've had a Caesar as well, but you know, for those vaginal deliveries, you've pushed a baby out. Of course, those muscles are weaker, and everything's going to feel a little like you
Yeah.
know, tender and unstable.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's I do think that it's worth getting it checked because you can
Yes.
sort of make all these things in your head and think that it's so much worse, and it's just coming in and getting it checked and getting like the okay, you
Yeah.
know, or like a plan of like what needs to
Definitely.
happen.
How long would you say, like if, I don't know, say you come in 6 weeks and it's like a bit swollen, there's a bit of scar tissue
Yeah.
and like things are a little bit
Mm.
different down there.
Mm.
But how long until things kind of go back to normal? Like,
Settle.
yeah.
I think that's like different for everyone because it does depend on like your pre-existing strength and function, and then you know the type of exercise that you want to get back into. So you know, I think on the right course of action you'll see a change from 3 weeks to the first 6 weeks, and then 6 weeks to the first 3 months,
Yeah.
and then again up to that 6 month point. So
Yeah.
it's a little hard to answer that, but definitely with the right work and you know, a young female fit body, like your body is pretty good at recovering itself
Yeah.
as well, like
Yeah.
just without
Yeah.
doing anything.
But
It's still
even even your vagina inside,
Yeah.
like obviously that gets stretched.
Yeah.
Does it depend how often you're doing your pelvic floor as to like,
Yeah.
like, you know,
It-
is my vagina
yeah, yeah,
just as tight as it used to be?
yeah. I don't know, Bridge, but
I mean, I
yeah,
asked
yeah.
my partner and he says yes, but
Yeah.
I don't know if he's telling me
Yeah.
porkies.
No. Okay. So on that, with because I just back to the prolapse thing.
Yeah.
With prolapse, having a bit of a prolapse and having sex, men don't feel it. So just alleviate any worry with that,
Really?
because people will be like, oh my God, what if he like feels that it's like so like different? Because like, you know, you're making it up.
That's
like
what my stress is.
No, they do not feel it.
Right.
There's no, they wouldn't know.
What about what
They
about
would have never heard of. No,
even like
no
your
idea.
vagina?
Like tensions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Well, I mean,
strength.
like, yeah, of course, like the more babies you have, if you had like 10 vaginal deliveries, it's not going to be what it was before.
Yeah.
You know, 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4 deliveries. Of course, like that's just what happens. It's the beauty of having babies,
Yeah, right.
you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, doing your pelvic floor exercises is like building the tone.
The female body is just so remarkable.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I've done no strength training
Yeah.
of any sort since having Alfie 9
Yeah.
months ago, and that was a brutal pregnancy in
Yeah.
that like I lost all pelvic floor strength because
Yeah.
I was vomiting so much for 6
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
I was messaging Phoebe being like, every time I'm vomiting, I'm just wetting myself
Yeah.
because there's nothing left.
Yeah.
Like the strength is just
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
I've done nothing and it hasn't been an issue.
Yeah.
Like the odd sneeze might catch me off guard
Yeah.
on a full bladder, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
nothing that I'm
I hear you.
particularly concerned about. And it
Yeah.
is just amazing
The body
that
just
what it can
does
do.
exactly.
What's
It's not
some
that-
exercises that we can do? What's
Some pelvic floor
Yeah.
exercises. Well, pelvic floor exercises alone are really important. Yes, but nothing else should move when you're doing your
Oh,
exercises. It
okay.
should always be a bit of a secret. So
like this?
if you're gonna do your exercises,
Yeah.
you should think about your
Who's
back
doing it now?
passage.
Come on.
Your back
Everyone's
passage like
doing
you're
it.
holding wind, your front passage like you're stopping a wee.
Yeah.
So like a
Midstream.
wee midstream, so it's like a squeezing and a lifting sensation, internal lift. So you might get a little bit through your lower tummy, but you shouldn't have your upper tummy working. Nothing else should be doing it. If you guys are doing it now, bravo, because nothing else is working. So yeah, you should feel it, but you should also feel it switch off and let go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
How long
keep
should
up.
you hold it for?
Individual. So
As
without
long as-
assessing you,
Oh,
like
right.
because like you might be able to hold a really good one for 5 seconds and do 10 of those. That's awesome. But Tash might be able to do 2 or 10 seconds. Like
Yeah.
so it's I mean
Yeah,
As long as you're doing them right.
individualized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you do have incontinence
Yeah.
post delivering
Yeah.
babies, how do you fix that? Is that just from doing
Post delivering babies. So
Yeah.
definitely
on any time?
there's an abundance of evidence for pelvic floor muscle training being the first line treatment for incontinence for sure. So doing them correctly. So often women, you know, might be a little bit better at targeting that back passage rather than the front passage. So you know, just doing a vaginal exam, you know, with someone that knows what
Yeah.
they're doing, and teaching you to do it properly. That's the key word, properly.
Yeah.
And doing that. And so there's
help.
great evidence to
Yeah.
it does help. Yeah, if you do it.
After birth, how should we manage pain and discomfort during sex? Is
Yeah.
that common?
Yeah, it is common for sure. So there's a few different reasons why women will get pain with sex after birth. So I think the first one is if you're breastfeeding, your estrogen levels are dropping, so that will dry the vagina. So then when you get like a dryness, and you know, that's where you can use like lubricants and stuff like that. But that's very common and just an effect of the lack of estrogen.
Yeah.
There are other reasons though, like, you know, after perhaps, like you were saying, a traumatic birth, where you've got scar tissue, you might have had some tearing, the response of the pelvic floor muscles might be to tighten and to become a little overactive and tense, and then that can create pain with intercourse as well. Even after a C-section, pelvic floors can get a little bit like sort of tight and wound up. Like if you had surgery on your neck, you know, the muscles or surgery on your shoulder, whatever, the muscles in your neck or something will get a little bit tight around it because they're sort of protecting.
Protecting it.
So that can happen with, you know, with then women can get pain with intercourse. And I have a funny story with that. So I treat obviously a lot of women in the postpartum period, and I saw this one lady maybe a year or 2 ago, and she came in, and I'd seen her at the 6-week check and, you know, doing whatever we were doing, and then I think maybe 3 months she came back and she said, you know, we had sex, it really, really hurt though. So I said, okay, well, we've kind of ruled out everything else is like looking and going quite well. Let's have a look at the pelvic floor and the muscles around the pelvic floor, like in the vagina. And we did a vaginal exam, and, you know, sure enough, on one, or I can't remember, both sides, some of the little muscles, they're a bit tight and trigger pointy, so release them. So internal release of the muscles. She came back like maybe the week after, or I can't remember, and said like, oh my God, like whatever you did, like
Wow.
no pain, great, like my husband sent me back here, so let's do that again.
Yeah.
So, which was great, and that happens a lot. But the funny part was, like, over the next few weeks, I'm like meeting these girls, and I'm like, oh yes, like it seems to be a hot run of like people wanting like saying I've heard releasing, and it turns out like I went through this girl, she went back to her mother's group and told all the girls, I went to this physio, she's massaged my vagina, you got to go. And so like everyone like they're like, I was part of so-and-so's mother group and so-and-so's, and I'm like, I'll just do the rounds of the mother's group. Yeah, I was like the resident, like, so anyway,
it just goes to show how common it is.
Well, it is so common.
Maybe some people don't talk about it. They're just like, I need to put up with this because I just had a baby and I have to do this for my husband, and then it's gone around the mother's group, and now everyone's having great sex.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you. All the husbands owe you a little dividend of that. Yeah. And how do you release it? Like, I'm just kind of like
trying to figure it out. Well, so like when we do like internal vaginal exams, there's feeling all the different pelvic floor muscles. You can get to some of the deep like hip rotator muscles like internally, and either like some soft tissue release, like little massage, or some trigger point, or
I think you need to study for that one, Dax.
Need to what?
Study for that one.
Oh yeah.
to Dakota's office.
So at what point, as soon as it's sore and tender, should you give it a while, or should you go straight to a women's health physio?
I mean, give it a little, don't put up with it for sure, because if you keep putting up with it, like if it happened once, maybe have another go and see, and then if it's still persisting, because if you keep putting up with it, it actually can create more issues and create more chronic pelvic pain, because it just goes even more like whoa, and just it makes it all a lot worse. So get onto it.
That's actually so interesting. I know nothing about this. I've never been like, I need to come see you.
You should.
I don't think I have any issues, but maybe I do.
Maybe you do.
Maybe I've got a lot of issues down there. I don't know.
I think after 3 kids, you should just have a like maintenance check. It's like getting your car serviced.